All right, I believe we are live. Welcome everyone to the live stream, and welcome to those who are going to see it later. I'm the Gym Philosopher. You may notice that my hair is not as long as it was before. This is good news because I got a haircut, and I like it. So, boom, I might look a little different, but I assure you, same old GM Philosopher. For those of you in the chat, will you drop me a comment and let me know to make sure that you can hear me okay? I just want to make sure the tech is working okay, but I think we should be okay to go. With that being said, what we're talking about today is preparing for the future of your D&D, how to prepare for the future, how to think about the future. What are you going to do in the future? These are good things to think about. Robert H is in the house. Does it sound good? Thank you. Mr. Vincent's in the house. Says, holy crap, you look great. Sound fine. Very good. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Herminator says, nice hair, nice audio. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I went to a barber shop. I decided I wanted to change the long hair thing. I was starting to feel a little sloppy. Wanted to get back to looking a little more professional. I might even start wearing a suit and tie to these things. What do you think? Do you think I should? You think I should? You think I should pick up that suit and tie life? Let me know what you think. All right, now here's what I am thinking about when I think about thinking about the future of your D&D game. As we plan D&D and as we schedule things. So for example, let's say that you think to yourself, I want to start a D&D game. Maybe I'm going to start it online. Now, one of the great things about online gaming is that you can plan a little better because with online, you're not having people coming over, right? So that's one thing. It's a little less labor intensive to plan because all you have to really do is sit down at your computer. You have to prepare all your stuff as normal, but you don't have to get your house clean and then have your house blocked off for hours at a time. With that being said, you still need to think about what you're going to be doing in the future. So let's say that you plan your game. You can plan it for Saturdays. Okay. But then you look at your calendar and you realize, you know what, 2 Saturdays from now, I have a work trip that I have to take. And then and the next Saturday after that, there's this family reunion thing. And then I have an open Saturday. But then for the next 2 Saturdays, I'm going out of town. Right. So looking ahead, thinking about, okay, am I available at this time? Just because maybe you think to yourself, yeah, I'm usually available, or maybe because you think to yourself, yeah, those days should be fine. That doesn't always mean that it's going to be fine. And sometimes those scheduling things can creep in, and then we have a question of whether to make D&D a priority or whether to just make it a once in a while thing. If we want to run consistent games, I'm a firm believer that consistency breeds more success than D&D. So if we want to run more consistent games, then we really do want to think ahead, think about, well, how many sessions am I going to have to cancel in the next month or 2 months or 3 months because of scheduling? If you're playing in your home, it goes even beyond that. You might think to yourself, okay, well, I think that Saturday is usually fine, but what about, is there a kid's birthday party on this one day? What about anniversary? What about if I'm going to have I don't know, have the party this day or having my friends over for the Super Bowl or whatever it is, right? There's a lot of things to think about. Now, this is one of the best things about online. Online makes it so much easier to plan D&D, but you can also plan it in your house. It's just important to think about. So when I think about planning the future of your game, that's what I'm thinking about. And I do have a couple things to read to you from in here in the Discord. And I want to open it up to call-ins, but basically, here is the end of the day comment from me about this topic. If you want to run a consistent D&D game, then just look at your calendar before you decide on that day. Look at that time period. What if you think to yourself, oh yeah, I'm going to start running my game on Wednesdays, but then you realize, hold on, wait a minute, my work schedule is going to change in 3 weeks. Well, that might mean that you should think about a different day, right? So if we just think about what usually is happening without checking our calendar, we can run into that problem. All right, I'm gonna drop the call-in link here. If anyone would like to call in, it's just a chill day here at GM Philosophy. We're hanging out. We are Well, I want to pin it. I can't pin it. I have to go to my other window and pin it. But yeah, we're just hanging out. We are just chilling out, enjoying the good vibes. I really appreciate everyone who's on the live stream. Thank you for being here. Let's check up on some of these comments here. Um, Kenneth says sound is great. Thank you, Kenneth. Mr. Vincent says Barbara starts drooling. Oh, I can show these. Maybe a vest and an ascot. I used to be a vest guy. Maybe I used to be a sweater vest guy. When believe it or not, for years, I shaved my head. And I shaved my head and I had like a short beard and I would wear sweater vests and like a button up. And that was what I wore a lot. So maybe, maybe I should. Awazark says, greetings, folks. Greetings to you, Awazark. Leslie Castles said, hellos. Hello, Leslie. It's great to see you in the chat. Kenneth Madsen says, I have a line of work where I can't commit to a regular day for games. It's all planned from game to game, but trying to make it every second week. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes you can't plan it out every single week. If you have like a work schedule that rotates, that makes it challenging. Some people, their work schedule, they never know when they're going to be work. Like some people might get off work, at 6 o'clock sometimes or at 10 p.m. sometimes. So it's very hard sometimes to tell. And in those cases, Kenneth, I think that what you're doing is pretty much what you need to do. You just need to try your best, schedule it as you can go. But that's a good thing though to be aware of, as I'm sure that you've realized. Better to make that upfront the plan than to try to be like, yeah, I'm going to run it at 10 or at 9 o'clock every Saturday. But then you realize, oh, I didn't even think about that. I'm probably going to have to work every other Saturday, right? Now, Garrick had a good comment in the Discord, and this actually takes this in a slightly different direction. But he said, on the coffee break subject, I'll share a screw up I did sometime back. I had the party, level 4, I think, hired out as muscle to protect ships that were running trade through a blockade. After a few trips, I realized the fights were ending up cut and paste, unthreatening, boring. I knew maybe a tenth as much about being a GM then and couldn't think of a way out other than a game-changing GM fiat. I had a giant rogue wave flip over the ship they were on and had them all drown trying to get out of the ship, shed armor, and so forth. Players were highly upset. Then, in quotes, and then you wake up the next morning. You are in a grassy meadow in a forest with all your equipment with an inviting valley ahead. And then jump to, but I hadn't sufficiently planned ahead where the ship situation was going, and the players had declined other options I'd come up with. So this was maybe 5-ish years ago. Okay, so it sounds like, Garrick, what you did was you kind of had them all die, and then they woke up somewhere else. So actually, I'm not upset about it. It sounds kind of like a fun direction to go in, but I do understand them being upset. And I do understand you calling it a game-changing GM fiat. And sometimes a reset is in order. Sometimes you have to reset things. Sometimes things get weird and it's time to change them up. Now, what Garrick is talking about is planning ahead in game, thinking to yourself, is this a good road to go down for the future of where I want to take this game in a gameplay sense, which is very relevant to thinking ahead about your game too. So not only do we want to think ahead about scheduling, but we want to think, is this the kind of game I really want to run? See, sometimes we think of an encounter. I need the caffeine. One moment. Sometimes we think of an encounter. Oh, Garrick's finally here. Garrick, I was literally just talking about your comment in the Discord. I just read it and I'm getting ready to discuss it. Sometimes when you think about an encounter, like, oh, I want them to be in this city and they're going to encounter this Thieves Guild person. You think to yourself, oh, this sounds like a really fun encounter. It sounds like a really fun thing. But then I need to think ahead. I need to think like, okay, but are they going to like then join the Thieves Guild? And is this going to become an urban Thieves Guild campaign? Is that what I was wanting? See, when we're sandboxing, we can't just railroad the players down a storyline, but we can be careful with what we present, knowing that they might choose it and they might really continue to choose it. So that encounter might sound fun, but what's going to keep them from committing to that full time forever now? And if they do, are you okay with it? Now, me as a GM, here's how I feel about it. I'm fine with letting the players do what they want to do, but I want them to enjoy it and I want them to like it. And I want to feel that energy. if they go down a road and things start getting stale, like what Garrick was describing here, and I know it's getting stale, then I want to do something different, introduce something new, introduce something different. And Garrick actually brought up an interesting point. He said, but I hadn't sufficiently planned ahead where the ship situation was going, and the players had declined other options I'd come up with. It sounds like Garrick did try to send them in different directions, but they didn't bite. Sometimes it'd be that way. Sometimes you have to change up the game because you know it's getting stale and it needs help, but the players maybe aren't doing it on their own for some reason. They're not choosing the way out that you try to give them. I find that this tends to happen a lot more with like newer players. I also it tends to happen with players who are like what I would call like not so much deep immersive role players, because deep immersive role players generally will be pushing for where they want to go. Whereas people who are a little more casual gamers, or people maybe who are not as into the deep role playing, they're more into like the combat parts of it. They'll just kind of like go wherever it seems the most logical to go. So anyway, I can totally see what Garrick is saying there. And here's what I, at the end of the day, think about this planning ahead business. Now, before I say this, keep in mind that I dropped the call-in chat link at the top of the stream. It's the pinned comment. Join my StreamYard link if you'd like to jump in here and discuss with me. I would love to have anyone jump in here, and we could even talk about whatever you'd like. The call lines are open. I'll be here for another 20-ish minutes or so for my coffee break, or you can drop your comments in here. I can pop the comments up on the screen and we can discuss them, which is super cool. I just realized like the week before last that I could do that and I like it. Okay, so here's my final thought on this. My final thought about this is that I want to think about my games, not only scheduling for the games, but I also want to think about in-game where we're going to end up, which is tricky because you don't want to railroad. But thinking about what you're going to propose and then making it like an easily enterable and exitable situation is also important. If you tie the players too well to a certain situation, you might find that they get stuck there, much to your displeasure as a GM, because maybe you think to yourself, I want my players to have options. I want my players to go do cool things. This is all really important. So boom, there you have it. That's really going to conclude my 2 cents on it. We've talked about Garrick's situation and we've covered all the comments. So now here is some news. I'm going to give you some news. So I think this is a great segue into some news. We have another 15 minutes. Number one, we have several new YouTube contributors getting ready to publish stuff on the channel. Now, the Rogue Lady runs Stealing the Spotlight every Friday at 5 p.m. So make sure you don't miss that right here on the GM Philosophy channel. Keep in mind that because I had a super busy weekend and I have not gotten caught up on stuff, that might be set back a Friday. But generally on Fridays, the Rogue Lady is here with Stealing Spotlight. We also have Sloan Running getting ready to come in with some content. I think his first video is dropping in 2 days, 5 p.m. on Thursday. Now, once again, we're set back a little bit. So whether it's this week or next week, I'm not sure, but that is something that's happening too. We also have Blake the Beholder, who's getting ready to drop a video. Now, Blake the Beholder, his segment is going to be called, I got to remember what it was going to be called here. I got to find it. I might not be able to. I believe it was called Rule of Cool. That's what it is. His segment is going to be called Rule of Cool, and he's going to be starting to drop some content. So while I do not have specific dates for these things, watch out for these things because we're getting more YouTube creators coming in here making videos. And listen, here's the thing. I envision for this channel a future where all kinds of great content is coming out by various different creators. We are working on it. We are super working on it. If you want to support this, go down in the description, join my Discord. You can also sign up for my mailing list, get my free Ultimate Plot Randomizer ebook. Then you can stay updated for news alerts. And if you haven't done it, consider signing up for my Ko-Fi membership. This is an affordable way to support the channel and all the awesome stuff's happening, the awesome stuff that is happening, and you get some cool benefits. So link to that is down in my description. Check that out as well. Now, Mr. Vincent actually brought up something really, really cool. Everyone, check out the Barren Lands tonight, 7 p.m. CST. Yes, episode 2 of the Barren Lands, my new Arctic Frozen Wasteland survival campaign, is running tonight, 7 p.m. CST. Do not miss it. It's going to be right here on the GM Philosophy channel. Going to be live streaming. Going to have everyone there, I believe. I'm super pumped about this. Also, fun fact, all the maps and like creative stuff I'm creating for this is going to all get put in the Ko-Fi membership thing. So if you want to use my maps and stuff, feel free to do that. Once I get them put in there. I haven't put them in there yet. Herminator's on the line. We're going to bring Herminator in here. Hey, Herminator, how's it going?
Not too bad. Can you hear me?
Good, good, good. What do you have to share with us today? What are your thoughts on? Were you going to share some thoughts about planning ahead for D&D, or did you want to talk about something else?
I just got on my break. You were talking about the finding the day of the week. I play with a group on Tuesdays, and we established Tuesday evenings as our time of the week, and we built a schedule around that. And every third week, we take a week off just so the current DM can have a little bit of a rest and plan some more stuff.
Are you the GM for that game, or are you a player in that game?
Currently, I'm a player, but I am getting we're finishing up Prince of the Apocalypse, and then we might do 1 or 2 one-shots, and then hopefully my campaign will be ready to run.
Heck, so yeah.
That'll be fun.
What are you going to run? What game are you getting ready to run?
Homebrew. Total homebrew.
Can you give us any insight into what the story might be, or do you not want to give it away right
now? Let's see. What was the blurb I came up with? What did I say? An ancient evil is returning when fought long gone. I don't think any of my players are here. I'm going to add in some kind of like a player-linked psychic psionic. And I think I put in the byline like a new magic is resurfacing, and people who do or don't have it are racing to keep a hold of it or find access to it.
Are there going to be illithids? Are there going to be mind flayers in this game?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think I was gonna do it some kind of like the main big bad is going to be the Vecna parallel.
Gotcha.
And I was gonna have it be something of like the players get connected to him, and that's why they're the ones that that's why they're the only ones that can defeat him. It's because there's some kind of mind link. A little bit of Harry Potter Horcrux.
Okay, nice. Heck yeah.
Yeah. And then I have a I guess it's monthly game that I DM for my wife and a few people from our church life group. And as for the scheduling of that, basically at the end of each, we try to play once a month. And at the end of each session, we try to basically be like, okay, what weekend is going to work out for us? And it's a pretty chill game. I wouldn't necessarily say I am railroading them, but they're fine to follow whatever story I give them. So if I give them a linear storyline, then they'll play a linear storyline. I'm trying to offer up some choices and things for them to.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, do we want to go to the town first? Or do we want to go straight to the capital?
Yeah, sometimes, especially in those like once per month-ish type games, actually works a lot better if the GM takes a little more like control of the storyline. I find it that in those like games where you don't play every single week, it can be really hard to sandbox it a lot because it's just a lot of time in between sessions. I feel like running it a little more with a storyline usually works better on those spread apart sessions
Yeah,
like that.
and they're all completely new players, so in a sense
Oh,
they
nice.
don't know what they can or can't do. So um, me giving them choices when I want to give them choices is what they know. Um, and so far we started, what was it, September ish was our first session. Um, we've gone we've gone once a month since about September, August of last year, and I think they're really enjoying it.
Heck
But yeah,
yeah.
we basically, it's like, oh well, this weekend's not going to work, or like, oh, we're going to be out of town that weekend, or no. Um, I think this last month we met towards the end of January, and then they were like, oh, how about 2 weeks? And it's like, I had to do some panic planning. That's what
Uh-oh. Are you still there?
I
There you
was
are.
trying to dismiss a notification, and it
Oh.
triggered the app. Um, I had to do some panic planning so that I was ready in 2 weeks instead of 3 or 4. Um,
Ah.
so talking about session planning, um, I haven't. I've been doing some on and off planning for my homebrew. Well, I'm running the monthly campaign in my homebrew world. In the, I guess, past, compared to what the time frame I'm going to run the Tuesday group. Um, but I've been slowly building things and making things, and uh, for the world at large. Um, but then, because the monthly campaign is more or less story focused, it's easier for me to be like, okay, I'm using Phandelver and Below Shattered Obelisk, and I'm trying to tie in Vecna Eve of Ruin to create a 1 to 20 campaign for them. Um, so the first few sessions have been pretty simple, following the book of, there's a goblin cave. They make it to town. They make it to the manor. They're on their way to the castle. Um, yeah.
Heck yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, I had some panic planning this last time because I was having them. It got to a point in the book where they're like, the characters are supposed to explore and
mhm.
figure stuff out. I'm like, but they don't want to explore. They just want me to give them the story. So how do I take possible exploration rewards and tie it in, and not just have them show up at the castle? So I made a dragon encounter for them, a mind
Ah.
controlled dragon by the big bad.
Oh
Um,
God.
yeah, and it was my first encounter that I completely made myself with the 2024 monster manual and things. Um, and mathematically, it was supposed to be a hard encounter, and it definitely was a hard encounter. I had 2 of the 4 get knocked to 0. Um, but I think one rolled a nat 20 on a death saving throw and came back up. Another got healed by the cleric. Um, yeah, it was fun. They loved it. It was enough of a challenge to not be a cakewalk, but it wasn't too hard that they have been scarred forever. But
Yeah.
it's been my
Not a total
experience.
party wipe, huh? That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Herminator, thank you so much for sharing. I'm gonna bounce you out so we can hear from
Okay.
William. But hey,
I'll go ahead and leave them. Yeah.
have a great rest of the day, and I appreciate you. Thanks for jumping on the call and sharing with
Yeah.
us. All right, talk to you soon, good sir. How's it going, William?
Hey, it's going pretty good. Can you hear me? Hear
I
me?
can hear you loud and clear. Sounds great.
All
All
right.
right, what are your thoughts on this planning ahead for D&D, both in game and outside of the game?
Oh, hey Avery. I do a lot of planning. I do a lot of prep. I think the only benefit I have is that I have material from 30 years, so it's a lot easier, I guess, for me, maybe compared to other GMs. But particularly y'all's game, actually, the Sunday game is my first game in the Darklands that I'm actually having to prep ahead of time, and I like to do at least a day or two of prepping. I do have like photography, of course, so that gives me enough time to prep compared to some other DMs might have like in 9 to 5 job or whatever. So I guess I have a little bit more leniency in that sense. But I like to put little spots, and I think hopefully y'all seen it in the game where I have points of interest. So it's not to take away agency from everybody. And I try to push it to where everybody feels that they can go wherever they want, and without having to throw in that idea of railroading them to a major plot. So the major plot is still out there that I do a lot of prepping for. I do a lore, and I kind of throw in little pieces here and there to kind of entice people to it. But at the same time, I like to have the players sort of go ahead and the way I like to do it, I guess if I'm prepping, I kind of improvise depending on what you guys are doing during the game, because you can never really tell how people are going to react in the game, right? They're always going to be obviously in the moment, and Cub, for instance, he went a little crazy the other session and decided he was going to start a uprising of the animals, and so there was a interesting chaos there. And in that part, I would improvise, but I have no prep, obviously, because I didn't know that was going to happen. But I know the general idea of the world, so at least I know what the laws and such are going to be because I already prepped that part of it. So I know if something's getting too much out of the hand, I know which main characters I can bring in to solve the situation. And I already have that prepped out as far as stat blocks and what they can do and spells and such.
Yeah.
So in the next session, when all that was happening, I already had a wizard who was going to be nearby. And all right, I'm going to put all these animals to sleep. So, sometimes you can't think of that, though. Sometimes you just gotta improvise and such. I guess, yeah, that would be pretty interesting in my way of thinking. I don't know how you do it with this new barren lands and such. Do you do anything similar to that?
Yeah, so in the Barren Lands, I have and I'm going to say this without spoilers because I do have some surprises. I want to surprise you being a player, and I don't spoil, but like my idea of it is very much like, okay, there's a situation with the players, which the players are obviously aware of. They're like in the Barren Lands and they're doing their things, but then there's like a mystery. For example, they found the cabin and the body, and they kind of know what's going on. Like at this point they've read the guy's journal and like this, so they kind of know what's going on. So it's like that's one situation. Maybe there's a little bit of mystery, like how did he die is kind of a mystery. So that's like a little mystery thing. But then there is other stuff going on, and then it's like, how likely is that stuff, which the players have no knowledge of yet? How likely is it to spill over into their world, and also how likely is it that they will want to get involved in it if they notice it? And so then it's a question of like, okay, I have those stuff planned. But then the big question in game becomes, how much do I want to put it right in front of the players, right? So there's like a big difference between them seeing something way off in the distance and then something trying to knock their door down, in the middle of the night. Like those are two very different levels of potential immersion. So I feel like I improvise a lot, like with that level of immersion. Like what I will improvise a lot is like, oh, okay, I had this thing planned that I wanted to put in front of them, but now this moment would be a perfect time for them to look up and see XYZ thing. Like, so that part I'll leave open to improvising. And I've learned very much that I hate to force those things, because
Yeah.
when I feel like when I try to force them, it always feels really gimmicky to me, like just as a GM. But when I let them just be and then I put them in there at the perfect time, that feels like it always feels really good. But it is still a planned thing that was going to happen. So in-game stuff, that's kind of how I plan it out. And then I also plan out some decisions some people are going to make. Like, for example, NPCs, maybe they know some things they're going to do, but the same thing. I don't like push when they do it. I just kind of chill on it. And I know at some point they're going to decide to do it. And then when the moment comes up, it's like, okay, boom, now it's perfect. A player notices them doing a thing, you know? So that's how
Well, I noticed that you had a lot. Like, I know I prep quite a bit. And, you know, I've had like where I prepped for days and days, and then the characters might not even go to a certain area. Like in y'all's campaigns, I have a lot of lore depending if you go to a certain area, and I've spent maybe at least a day for each area that I've wrote lore. And sometimes I've had players not even go there. And it's just lore that I have for future campaigns or something. I noticed with the books and journals that you had, how long did it take you to prep all that? Like, how long for this one session would you say you took in order to plan ahead?
So that session, what I did was I spent 3 days and I blocked out basically 2 hours of time per day. Now that's just on those books and journals and stuff. That's not including the maps. The maps were kind of a different thing because I made those and I had to mess with them and do things with them. But that was all kind of different. The books themselves, which are kind of like part of that is like sort of categorized under the mystery of this like dude you found in this little cabin. So it's like that's all like part of that mystery. So all that stuff, probably about 6-ish hours of prep time. I think about like that.
Yeah, I think that's about the same as
And then one of the most difficult things about that is like thinking through, okay, what was found in there? Because like for me, it was like, you know, thinking through like what would this guy have had? What would have made sense? And I actually put a lot more in there than I was planning on, because I'm like, no, he wouldn't have come out here without these things. Like he would have had these. And there's so it's like actually in a survival campaign, giving the players tinkerer's tools was kind of like man, I wasn't going to give him tinkerer's tools. But as I fleshed out that mystery, I realized it would actually not make sense for him to not have tinkerer's tools. And that mystery was more important to me than like restricting access to the tinkerer's tools. So it's like, that's the decision. But it was interesting. That actually took me a lot of brain work. I worked on that all 3 days, just going back and rechecking my list and being like, okay, what actually is there? What makes sense? I want that to be really solid, like super solid. To me, that was like the most important part. And then the science papers were kind of fun. And then the journal was really fun, super fun stuff. But I do tend to write things out like that, like pretty fast. And that is like easier for me. Like writing out a journal is a lot easier for me than doing things like itemizing things that are found or like loot or like things like that. Those tend to be more challenging for me because I really try to think. One thing I don't like at all is when people search a body and it's like, what did they have on them? And I give them a list of the loot, but it's kind of obvious there would be more. Like you described him as a person who had a ring on his finger, but there's no ring in this loot list. And then I think to myself, I didn't think through I described there being a ring, but I didn't think through putting that on the loot list and what exactly it is. And you can spontaneously do that, but that's just like a little example for me of some like if I'm going to spend time prepping, that's one of the things I spend a lot of time on, I feel like.
It's interesting. Yeah. Because I kind of, it's weird because when people search bodies, I guess I work a little bit differently because when I'm prepping it, I know if they're following a certain plot. Because I've had people completely, for instance, in my game, y'all haven't done this yet. Well, I don't know if y'all ever will, but I've had people completely be there and completely take a whole different route. And For me, like I said, it's because I already have a pre-created world in a sense, so I kind of already have certain plots in different places. But in that same sense, I guess I do it in a smaller scale. So unless I really have it particularly linked to the background of an NPC, I have the list of what I know the players are going to find, but I don't associate it with a particular NPC. So when the NPC dies, I could be like, do I want them to find it in this particular juncture because of the way the story's going, or do I want them to find it later? So I have the list prepped, but if it doesn't, that particular character, I could say all of a sudden in my mind, you know what? I'm going to make him be the main character all of a sudden that wasn't part of this background, and I'm going to put the list on this particular character.
Oh,
but
nice.
if I don't want him to be, like that, I'll just switch the list over to, okay, it's going to be found on this particular one, not this one, because it doesn't make sense in this particular time to kill this guy, and they thought it was the main boss, but all of a sudden it's not because they don't have like the main stuff on them.
Yeah.
That's my way of doing it, compared to having them, I guess, in that particular. It's like, yep, that character has to have that list. It's like, nah, I think I'm just going to switch it over to this one.
Yeah, no, that's actually really cool, especially if the loot is an important part of it. Like, it's like if you think to yourself, yeah, the characters are going to find this locket, right? Maybe it's like a quest item and it's like, put it in whoever's pocket, like, but focusing on the locket, I think is a really good choice, because it's like, it's not as much about who has it, but the way that fate is going to work is that at some point they're going to find that locket in someone's pocket, and that's like you putting that story in front of them in a cinematic way. It's like it's the camera magic. It's just about the location of the object, kind of.
And then if you get deep into the symbolism or tonality and such of the story, you can just time it just right if it doesn't feel correctly for this particular character. And sometimes you just do. I know for the pro game that I had on Sunday before I go and run y'all's, they just ended up killing one of the vampire ladies, and they searched her body, and they put the little girl asleep because it was the vampire lady's daughter. And so everybody was all sad because it's like, okay, I'm going to search this vampire lady's body and stuff after we murder her. And this Dampier was like devouring her, eating her, like trying to figure out if he could get powers or she could get powers and stuff. And then like the I don't know if it was the cleric or I think it was the other Dampier that was searching, and they found a locket and they open it. And it's like, what's in there? Well, you see the picture of this female vampire, but you also see the daughter that you're currently carrying, sleeping in your arms. And it says, to love mama always and stuff on the back and all this stuff. So it's like that one kind of hit the emotional strings and stuff. And so that one I did plan for her to have it because it made sense for that particular one to be carrying that locket of her daughter and such. But I was going to ask you, have you ever had, we were talking about agency and not railroading. I know I had it done to me a couple of times and I was fine with it. But for instance, in like something similar to what we have in the Barren Lands, have you ever had somebody completely just go off to a different, I guess, plot line?
So do you mean like, for example, you mean go off different as in leave the group and go do a different thing?
Not necessarily leave the group. I think everybody tries to stick to the main rule number one, don't leave group. But as a group together that decide, you know what, I don't want to, like in my pro game I'm currently running, they're in this vampire infested city, and they were like, or town. And they were like, you know what, we should just leave and go elsewhere. And I was like, okay, well, if y'all want to leave, then go elsewhere. That's fine. And I prepped a lot for it. I, made like maps for houses, the mines, the story, the lore. I even put little areas where they can hover over, and you can see like the beginnings of a writing that says, oh, this paper is crinkled and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of prep. But then if they were to leave, I wouldn't mind it still because I might mind it a little bit, but I was like, it's all right. Now they're gonna go to a different story, so I have pre-planned other stuff in my world. But as for you, like if you ever had a group like that, just like, you know what, we don't want to stay in the cold. We're just gonna move. We're gonna go that way or something.
Yeah. So yes, I have, and so there there was a time when I was more focused on like story driven campaigns and stuff, and so there would be like kind of a central storyline, and the players would mostly follow it, but then they would do their own side quests along the way. But the lately, I would say in this era of my gaming, like running games, I have really changed it to be more intentionally sandboxy. So like
Mhm.
for example, really the core quest of the story for the Barrenlands is actually kind of the mystery of why the players are even there. So I assume they're going to kind of try to figure that out, or at least if they come across information about it, they will be like, "Oh, I see," and that's like the quest. But then, but what they choose to do with that is actually extremely open ended to the point where I'm still wondering if they're going to choose to try to make it a local thing or if they're going to travel. Because to me, that's like a big crossroads I'm waiting for. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not sure if the group is going to stay, like, for example, at that cabin until something else happens, or if they're going to actually bounce and try to travel somewhere. To me, that's going to make the biggest difference. And I kind of feel like that's where it crossroads out for me. And then, but what if they're split on that? That would be like the hardest scenario to deal with. Like, what if 3 players stay and then 2 players leave? All I can say is it'd make it more dangerous for all the players. That's kind of what it comes down to, because it gets to be
Yeah.
like pressure. Because without the group, it would be harder for them to survive. So it's like, and then one thing I do hope that doesn't happen when I'm running games is I'm kind of hoping that the group doesn't split very much, because I want players to get more playtime. And when you split the group, like, players get less playtime. I actually, from a story driven sense, I don't care if players split up. It's actually kind of fun to
Yeah.
do, like, zone in those things. But I start to feel like, oh man, I feel bad that, some players are just sitting, not get playing. While if they're all together, they can continue to play together. But like, the way that I would run that situation if they split up would be kind of like, oh, it's fine, but it is going to become more dangerous in this setting if they do that. And so that's also a reason why I kind of hope they don't do it, because it actually is high key dangerous. Like, this area and setting is like super dangerous. So like, anyway, I don't know if
Foreshadowing
that
here.
answers what's that?
I said foreshadowing here. No,
Yeah.
because I know what my character is wanting to do, but at the same time, she's smart enough. And that also kind of lingers, and me and my buddy Jay were talking about it, and he's set in a lot of my actual like friend campaigns where I'm playing and we're all sitting at the table together. And he's noticed that I do allow a lot of people to just go wherever in the city. It happens a lot more in the cities than when they're actually on the road. But in the cities, they kind of go all over the place. And he also noticed that a lot of people who go by themselves usually end up dying in my campaigns. And I'm not
Oh.
intending for that to happen, but it's just because for Grom, for instance, he was alone, and I was like, oh man,
Mhm.
and it's going to be another death here. I know if he doesn't survive it. And it's like, so he was alone. It was the perfect opportunity.
Yeah.
But I haven't had, and like I said, I don't mind it if they split because I already have certain things. I kind of know what's happening in the cities and I've already prepped for that. But you do have to do a round robin and make sure everybody is getting their turn. I know in our Sunday game, it's interesting because like Tarnik, he's a certain way, so he's just for like 3 days he's building the armor, so he's really not going to be able to do anything else. And it's like, how are we going to role play this? And I try to get a little bit of interaction. Maybe he's getting help, but at the same time, he's only going to get so much help, and for 8 hours or so that he's going to be there, he's still just going to be hammering away. So
Yeah. Yeah. Which
I don't.
leads. leads to an interesting thing, which I kind of think is important. And I actually get closer and closer to this. And actually, this is a really good segue into this discussion is actually talking about that out of game. Like, for example, like for me, when I'm in game, like when I'm playing Grom or whatever, one thing that I'll really prioritize actually is trying to be with the largest concentration of players. Usually, like I'll try to do that. It's sometimes it's kind of rare, or I'll invite them to go with me if I have to go do something. Like Grom wanted to go buy the saddle on that one game session, so he did invite other players, but nobody went with him, which was fine. But at least putting out there, like, hey, let's all go, and then also out of game, I feel like I've started doing things like saying, now, just so you know, if you guys do split up, we're going to be moving from group to group. And so there'll be like a little less playtime. Doesn't matter. I'm just letting you all know that if you would like to get more playtime, staying together you might want to make that like part of the story, but it's up to you. But just like because I don't know about you, but I feel actually high key bad when like there's too many groups and then people are waiting for too long, especially if combat happens for one group and not for the other. It can get so lopsided.
That is my biggest fear right there, is trying to do combat. I know when we did your combat, I wanted to get it out of the way really quickly so I knew what was going to happen and get back to the rest of the players and such. And granted that we don't have in my mind, a full 5 group game going yet. But once it gets to 7 people, I feel the pressure on myself. It's just me, but I'm like, oh man, he's not getting role play. So I ask him, okay, so what do you want to do? What are you doing, sir? And then they say, oh, I'm just doing this. I'm done. I'm like, oh, okay. You do realize we're going to go through the rest of the people, right? Because, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm done. I was like, oh, okay. So that's my lingering fear, is what are they going to be doing? So I try to get everybody's spotlight, but I've noticed that splitting the party also has to do with experience. And the one thing I love that you do in the game is like having another DM. You're like another DM that's like a helper for me, because you actually are aware of that. New players usually are not aware of that, and they'll like spotlight hog. Not that they're intending to do it, but I think humanity just has that essence of, if you let a person talk, they're going to talk about themselves forever. Players, that kind of sort of waves into the player mentality as well, without some people unintentionally, or they're not intentionally doing it. So when people have been playing D&D for a while, or even DM'd for a while, I think they're pretty aware of that. And so that's what I like about you and the way that you do that. You at least try to share the spotlight hog. No, share the spotlight. The spotlight. Yeah. You're not hogging it. I'm telling you. No.
Well, I try. I sometimes verge on it. I'm a natural spotlight hog. I have to really watch myself. But I do feel a sense of urgency. Like if I'm role playing a lot, I'll be like, okay, like time's come up. It's time for someone else to do something. Like my GM clock is going as I'm role playing.
And I try to keep it like that. Sometimes when some players are really going on and on and on, I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm going to try to end them right here. And hopefully so that way they can give to somebody else. And then like Tarnik, I think Waz is in here. Yeah, sometimes he's just doing what he's doing. And I feel like I don't give enough spotlight to Tarnik sometimes. And then sometimes I feel like, I know Cyrix just joined us and stuff for Avery's character. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's see. So I kind of tried to stay. Well, I was pretty tired this past session. I had to end early, but I was kind of quiet more than I was talking and trying to see what they were going to do. But after like 10 or 20 seconds of silence, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to do something now. But yeah.
Kelf said this, and I wanted to tell you guys something I do. Kelf says, if the party splits and combat starts, have the players out of combat be the ones to roll dice for enemies. I actually really love this. But here's another thing I do, Kelf. I'll also tell them, for every one of the players you you can manage to get down to death saving throws, I will give you an in-game reward. Either like I'll give you like a free inspiration point. That's usually what I promise, or I'll give you a free advantage roll. And then my players will be like, oh heck yeah, and they just really go after them. I let them control like the enemy henchmen. It's so much fun. And then the players who are trying to survive the combat then will be like, oh great. It's funny, but anyway, Shibaya. I asked Waz if he feels skipped or does he feel good about the amount of playtime he gets. I feel like that's an interesting question. I would like to hear actually what Waz has to say about that. But I wanted to go up to another comment. There was one a little ways back here that was really good. Kenneth Madsen said, as far as planning gameplay ahead, do you have experience having different player directions taken lead to the same end scenario to have less planning, improvising to do? And I think this is exactly what we were talking about. So players might branch off, take different directions, and then is there a way to plan for them arriving at the same end scenario? And then to follow it up, Garrick said, which I think is the second part to this question, that works up to a point, but they figure out it's all quantum ogres and they realize agency has been taken away, which is the danger. That is the danger that happens if you try to force them all back together, kind of thing. So what do you think? How do you deal with that?
You know what's interesting about that? When I jumped back into D&D, what has it been, a year and a half now, or a year or so? When I jumped back into it,
Mr. Vincent had a kind of an answer too. I'll put that up there. But anyway, go ahead.
Like I've always explained, the way that I like to do it is I don't like to follow a large plot, though there is an existing large plot in my world. I don't force people to follow it. While I might throw little enticements for them to follow it, I've had them run off to other places. But what I've had is that in the player's mind, they constantly think they don't have the agency. And it was interesting because they always asked me, well, we kind of knew you wanted us to go this way. And I was like, actually, I wanted y'all to go north and y'all south. And in their mind, they thought that I was leading them there just because of it was going to be the end game anyway. And I was like, not really. And so what I did, I had to show them in behind the curtain a little bit, not everything, but I showed them how I have like a web of plots and those interesting points to have their own lore and plots. But above that is the large overall arcing plot that if they decide to go after it, because all my campaigns in my world can all affect every other campaign. Like you guys are currently going after the spell engine in a way, but I already have my Monday campaign are in the thicket of it. They're in the last boss of that campaign. And they're like, if they're able to defeat this humongous boss, that kind of switches y'all's idea of the campaign. A little metagaming here, but will y'all's characters know that? Who knows? The word might reach y'all. So on the smaller scale, without going after the big plot, if they change, then I'll allow them to change. And like I said, the only reason I'm able to do that is because I already have like years of lore and different plots and different bosses that they can go to and completely change their outcome. Now, not everybody can do that, because maybe a new DM is barely starting from the bottom up instead of top down. So if they change, it might throw them off a little bit. But for me, I would say just improvise in the beginning and then create something new. And the way I would say to do that is have 3 to 4 different other of your big ending bosses storylines, so that way they have a different place to go and they feel like it's not railroading them in a sense.
So I feel like here's how I do this. And actually, Mr. Vincent actually kind of touched on this. Wait a minute. That's the wrong comment. Hold on. I got to find the real one. The one that was dealing with that question. Where did it go? Where'd it go? Well, anyway, where did it go? Or was it not here? Well, I don't know where it was, but anyway, I will sometimes go out of game for this too. And I'll say something like to the group of players who are actually approaching the big bad scenario, and then the players who kind of have drifted off like away from it, I'll sometimes say, okay, now out of game, I'm going to give you as players just a little bit of a heads up. What these players over here are doing looks a lot like a setup for some kind of key, maybe event of some kind, maybe a combat oriented one. I'm just letting you all know, if you wanted to like assemble as one unit, I'm letting you know out of game that now might be an advantageous time, but feel free to do whatever you want to do with that information. So I kind of think of it as like I'm telling the players their characters are just going to do whatever they want to do, but I give the players a little heads up about it. I have started doing that, and I actually kind of feel like I like that approach if it's really going to matter a lot, because it could be a big feel bad if 3 players fight dragon, arc, session ending dragon, and then these 2 players are 3 miles away, not even in the situation, and then maybe they legitimately were there because they didn't think there was going to be any like big thing going on over here. So I like communicate with them a little bit, give the whole party kind of like a little heads up. Anyway, that's how I've kind of been dealing with it lately. And I think that I like that approach. That's a little experimental for me at this point, but I think I kind of like it.
Yeah, give them some outside information. I know I've been experimenting with like warning them when they're going up against a big boss, and that's like, yeah, just expect death if y'all want to go that route.
Well, yeah. Or one thing I'll say, my version of that is to say, when you see this situation, immediately you get a deep sense of fear. You realize this is a very potentially mortal situation. Like you get the sense of grave danger. And then I'll say something like, to players who aren't used to what that means, I'll say, hint, hint, this is a deadly encounter, actually, like very deadly. That's
Okay.
me in game trying to tell you like it is.
I'll keep that in mind for Valanthe.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
But so it's getting on to 2:00. So I'm gonna go ahead and head on out, and I got a commercial video to finish here for one of our restaurants here and stuff. But
well, thank you very much for chatting. It's always a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, and we'll see you at 7 today.
Yeah, I'll see you then. Looking forward to it.
All right. See y'all. Goodbye.
All right. With that being said, there's one more thing I want to discuss before we wrap up the live. I want to give a big shout out to Craig, who is our currently first Ko-Fi Gold supporter. If you would like to support the live streams, the videos, the Discord, and everything else going on here at GM Philosophy, please go down in the description. Think about signing up for our Ko-Fi membership. We have 4 different membership tiers. They each come with different levels of benefits, and you become a patron of the arts here at GM Philosophy. So we want to give a big shout out to Craig for sponsoring our videos and for supporting the channel. And to the rest of you, I say thank you so much for joining me. And I've had a great time, and I will see you all tonight, 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, the Barren Lands. Everyone have a great night, and I will talk to you later.